400 years. Not a single wound had ever touched me. Now I could not lift my own head from the pillow. The fog crept up from the valley, pressing against every window of the castle on the spine of the mountains. And inside, 12 of the finest minds in the world stood around my bed, human and otherwise, arguing over my body as if I were a puzzle and not a king. My skin had cracked like clay left too long in the sun. My eyes had gone milk pale. Black veins crept up my arms like ink through water. They looked at their charts, their books, their instruments. Not one of them looked at me. They called it a curse, a disease, an ancient bloodline collapsing. They were all wrong. Somewhere 3 floors below, a refrigeration unit shivered, and a girl with a mop was about to smell something 12 geniuses could not. The scent of tarnished silver. I did not know that yet. I only knew I was dying, slowly, one night at a time. My name is Aldrich Vaymont. For 400 years I ruled the dark places of this world, and I was dying in a bed I could no longer feel beneath me. Let me tell you how it happened. Slowly. Because slow is all I have left in me now, and because the truth deserves to be told the way it was found. One quiet thing at a time. It began with my hands, a tremor, nothing more. On the night of the winter solstice, I lifted a glass of aged blood to my lips, and the surface trembled. A single ring of movement. There, then gone. I told myself it was the cold. Except I do not feel the cold. I have not felt the cold since the reign of kings whose names are now dust, so I told myself it was nothing. That was my first mistake. Believing that a creature like me could still be visited by nothing. Ravensholt Manor sits on the spine of the mountains, where the fog comes up from the valley like breath from a sleeping thing. To the human world, it is the private estate of a reclusive man of great wealth, a name in a ledger, a tax shelter, a rumor. To my kind, it is a throne. I built it stone by stone across 2 centuries. I chose every beam, every window, every dark hallway that turns and never quite lets you see what waits at the end. A house should feel like its master. Mine felt like me. Cold, beautiful, and older than anyone could stand to imagine. I filled it with my court, my advisors, my guards, my physicians. I filled it with the loyal and the ambitious. And I learned long ago that those are often the same people wearing different coats. And at the center of all of it, at the top of the winding stair, in the east wing where no servant was permitted after midnight, there I lived, feared, respected, untouchable. Until I wasn't. By the first thaw of spring, the tremor had become a weakness, a softness in the joints, a slowness in the blood. By the second month, my skin had begun to change. I want you to understand what that means for one of us. My skin was porcelain, luminous, perfect in the way that only the truly unnatural can be perfect. Men had wept looking at it. Women had forgotten their own names, and it began to dry, to crack, like clay left too long in the sun. Fine lines first, then fissures, then a dull gray ash where there had once been light. My eyes clouded, the blue I had worn for 4 centuries. Gone milk pale, as if someone had breathed frost across the inside of the glass. And the veins, God help me. The veins beneath my skin turned black, not the deep red black of old blood. A dead black, a rotting, spreading, necrotic black that crept up my arms like ink through water. I was the immortal king of the night, and I was going to ash, and no one, not one of the great minds soon to gather under my roof, could tell me why. I did not summon anyone at first. Pride. A king does not announce his weakness. A king waits and hides it, and hopes it passes the way weather passes. It did not pass. It deepened. Night by night, bag by bag. Though I did not know to count the bags yet. That would come later. That would come from someone I had not yet troubled myself to notice. There is a particular horror in a being who has never once been sick, learning, in his 400th year, the vocabulary of decay. The word for the ache in the jaw. The word for the tremble that came when I tried to grip a glass. The word for the thing that woke in my chest at 4 in the morning and would not let me sleep. Fear. That was the word. I had not felt it in 300 years, and I did not recognize it at first. I mistook it for cold. There is that word again. Cold. The thing I do not feel and kept insisting I felt. I know now what it was. It was my body telling me a truth my mind was too proud to hear. Something was killing me. Something patient. Something that knew me. And it was inside the walls of my own house. I lay awake and I ran through my enemies. 4 centuries is a long time to make enemies. There were clans across the sea who had sworn my ruin over grievances, so old the men who first spoke them were dust. There were the hunters, the ones who thought a wooden stake and a righteous cause were enough to end a thing like me. There were rivals within my own kind who eyed Ravensholt the way a wolf eyes a wounded stag. I catalogued them all, everyone. And I did not once, not one single time, turn my eye to the man who slept 3 doors down, the man who brought me my glass each evening. The man I had trusted for 300 years, because that is the trick of it. That is the oldest trick there is. You look outward for the knife, you scan the horizon for the enemy, and all the while the hand that will kill you is the one you shake each morning, the one you never think to watch. Because to watch it would be to admit that 4 centuries of judgment had been a fool's game from the start. By the time I could no longer hide it, by the time my hands shook so badly I could not sign my own name, by the time the black had climbed past my wrists, it was already, though I could not have known it, far too late. Too late for the wise men who would come. They would look at charts, all of them, every last one, and they would miss what a girl with a bucket saw in a single breath. Enter the girl. I did not enter her. She entered my world. But that is not how I think of it now. Now I think that she was the door, and everything that came after walked through her. Her name was Cora Bell. She was 23 years old, and she was, by every measure the wise men would have used, entirely unremarkable. She was not a warrior, not a witch, not a scholar of the dark arts. She had no gift, no lineage, no weapon. She had a mop and a bucket, and a debt so large it had swallowed her whole life before her life had properly begun. I learned all of this later, in pieces, the way you learn the truth about the people who save you. Never all at once, always too late to thank them properly. Her younger sister was sick, Grace, a girl even younger than Cora, kept alive in a specialized facility whose monthly cost read like a ransom note. Cora had been paying it the only way a girl with no money can pay anything. With her body, her hours, her back, her sleep. She had worked as a silversmith's apprentice. Did you catch that? Hold on to it. It will matter more than any weapon in this story, but the medical bills came, and they came, and they came. And an apprentice's wage does not stop a flood, so she took whatever work paid, and then a strange agency offered her a sum of money that made no sense. To clean. At a private estate, in the mountains, no questions, no phone, no name. She signed the papers, she signed all of them. Non-disclosure agreements thick as Bibles. She handed over her phone at the gate like a soldier surrendering a rifle, and she walked into a house full of monsters, and she had no idea. This was 3 months before the night everything broke. Understand that. 3 months she lived under my roof before she ever set foot in my room. 3 months a stranger to me. A stranger to all of us who dwelled above the servants' floor. She learned the rules fast. The clever ones always do. Keep your head down. Never meet a guest's eyes. Never, under any circumstance. Enter the East Wing after midnight. She became a ghost, which was the smartest thing she could have done. A ghost survives a house of predators by being nothing at all, by being a draft, a shadow, a sound you don't turn to look at. For 3 months she cleaned floors I never walked, and polished silver I never touched, and washed linens from rooms I would never enter. She was invisible by design, hers and ours both, and she watched. That is the thing no one accounted for. A ghost, being nothing, being ignored, sees everything. She learned the house, the rhythms of the guards, the hours the cellars stood empty, the way the fog came down at 10 and lifted at 4. She learned it the way you learn a thing, when your life might one day depend on it. Not because she planned to use any of it, but because a girl who has been poor and afraid her whole life learns, young, to know the shape of every room she stands in, and every door out of it. She did not know she was building a key. She was only noticing locks. It is a habit of the powerless, and it would, in the end, save the most powerful man in that house. Then I started dying in earnest, and the house went mad, and the invisible girl became the only thing that could save me. Here is a truth about power. When the powerful begin to fall, the vultures do not wait for the body to cool. They arrive early, they circle, they call themselves mourners. My most trusted advisor summoned the doctors, Sebastian Vane. 300 years at my side, 300 years. And I would have laid my life in his hands without a breath of hesitation. I did lay my life in his hands, but I am getting ahead of myself. And I promised you slow. Vane brought them from every corner of the world. 12 specialists, human and otherwise. He arranged their travel, their lodging, their fees. He was tireless in it. Grief, everyone said, made him tireless. There was Dr. Nathaniel Graves, a surgeon once. Brilliant, famous. A man who had faked his own death to serve creatures like me. Because we pay in things that don't appear on any invoice. He became the head of the council. Remember his name too. There was Dr. Osric Calloway, ancient, an apothecary from the old country. He believed in curses the way other men believe in gravity. His remedies smelled of the grave and worked about as well. And there was Silas Marsh, who ran the blood bank in the cellars. Not a physician, a technician, a quiet man with heavy boots and a habit of not meeting anyone's eyes. I thought that was humility. It was not humility. They came with mobile laboratories and leather grimoires, and egos large enough to fill my cavernous halls. They filled my library. They drank my scotch. They argued over my body as if I were a puzzle and not a king. And they needed a servant, someone to clean the bedchamber, to sterilize the equipment, to carry away the waste that even monsters do not like to touch. They chose the ghost. Why her? Because of 2 accidents of birth. The first, her blood. O negative, rare, clean, the universal gift, useful in a house that runs on blood the way other houses run on wine. The second, something stranger. She could not be compelled. I do not know why. Some humans are simply built that way. A locked room in the mind where our influence cannot reach. She could stand before any one of us, and we could pour our will into her eyes, and it would run off her like water off stone. Vain thought that made her safe to keep close. A servant who could not be turned into a spy. A servant who could not be made to talk. He was right about the first part, and catastrophically wrong about the second, so after 3 months of being no one, Cora Bell was sent up the winding stair, into the east wing, into the room where the king lay dying, to clean, to be nothing, and that is where I first truly saw her. I want to describe what I was in those days, so you understand the weight of what came next. I could not sit up without help. I who had torn men in half. I lay in a bed the size of a small chapel, 4 posts of black oak carved with the faces of my ancestors, and I could not lift my own head from the pillow for more than a moment. Machines surrounded me. Heart monitors beeping their thin electronic prayer, refrigeration units humming, holding bags of rare fortified blood that no longer did me any good at all. I drifted, in and out, lucid, then lost. There were hours I lost entirely. Days, perhaps. Time became a thing that happened to other people, and through all of it, the girl cleaned. She was quiet. She was efficient. She did not look at me. She followed the rules perfectly, until the night I ruined the sheets, a coughing fit took me. They came without warning, those fits. My whole body would seize, and I would bring up blood. Not red, black, ash black, the color of what I was becoming. It spattered across the white sheets like a curse made visible. Dr. Graves was in the corner, reviewing a chart. He did not look up. He barely paused. He simply said, in the flat voice of a man ordering a meal, "Clean that up before the stain sets." Before the stain sets, that is what I had become. A stain. To the head of my own medical council, a thing to be blotted before it marked the linen, the girl came with a warm cloth, quick, careful, and as she reached across me to wipe the black from my chin, some animal part of me, some last ember of the thing I used to be, reached out and caught her wrist. I do not know why I did it. I was barely conscious. My grip was nothing, a whisper of the hand that had once crushed stone. But I held her, and I opened my clouded eyes, and I looked at her, and I said the words that started everything. I apologize. For the mess. She froze. I felt it. The stillness that came over her. Total. Absolute. Like a deer at the edge of a road. Because in 3 months in that house, no creature like me had ever spoken to her as if she were a person. Let alone apologized to her. Let alone thanked her for cleaning up the evidence of his own decay. "It's my job, sir." That was all she said. Her voice shook. She pulled her wrist away. Gentle. Not afraid. Careful. As if I were the one who might break, and I felt something move through me that had nothing to do with the poison. Something warm. Something almost forgotten. I let her go. She finished her work. She left, but I watched the door for a long time after it closed. Here is a thing that happens to a man when he is dying. And everyone around him has already written the ending. He starts to watch. I had nothing else to do. I could not move. I could not lead. I could not tear the throat from any man who insulted me, which, in that house in those weeks, was nearly all of them. So I lay in my bed and I watched. I watched the girl. And I watched the doctors, and slowly, in the long gray hours, I began to see what neither of them knew I could see. She was different from the others who tended me. The nurses the doctors had brought moved through my room like it was a task. She moved through it like it was a person. She straightened the blanket that no one had asked her to straighten. She turned the harsh lamp away from my eyes. Small things, invisible things. Kindnesses that cost her nothing and that no one had ordered, and that no one but a dying man with nothing to do but watch would ever have noticed, I noticed. One night she thought I slept, and she stood a moment at the foot of my bed, and she looked at me. Not at a chart, not at a monitor, at me, and her face held something I had not seen in that room from anyone. Not pity. Something harder and better than pity. She was angry, on my behalf, that no one was helping me. I closed my eyes before she caught me watching, and I lay there in the dark, and I felt, for the first time in weeks, less alone. There was a moment late in that first week that I have never told anyone. She thought I was deep in the fog, and she was wiping down the machines, and she began very softly, almost without meaning to hum. Some tune. Something from the human world, I suppose. A thing a mother might sing. A thing her mother might have sung to her, and she to Grace, in some small apartment far from this cold mountain. She caught herself. She stopped. She glanced at the bed to be sure she had not woken me, but I had heard it. And in 400 years of feasts and symphonies and the finest musicians gold could buy, I do not think I had ever heard anything I wanted to hold on to more than that half a bar of a song a frightened girl hummed to a dying monster because she could not stand for the room to be so silent. I did not know her name yet. I would learn it soon. And I would learn in the end that it was the only name in that entire house that had ever meant me anything but harm. The doctors were a spectacle, 12 of the most decorated minds in the known and the hidden world, and they behaved like children fighting over a toy. They formed a council in the library beneath my chamber. A round table. I could hear them through the floor. On the nights, the fog was low, and the house went quiet. Their voices came up through the old stone like water through a crack. Dr. Graves believed it was a disease, a mutated pathogen. Something modern. Something that had learned to hunt creatures like me specifically. He wanted transfusions, synthetic plasma, hyper-oxygenated, laced with broad-spectrum drugs. Pumped into me by the bag, I remember that fluid, glowing, thick, viscous. It went into my veins cold and wrong, and my body answered with a seizure that nearly snapped my spine in two. The girl was in the room when it happened. Standing in the corner with a tray, I saw her flinch. I saw her hands tighten on the silver. I saw her want to move toward me and stop herself, because the rules said stay still. Be nothing. Don't be seen. The seizure passed. Graves wrote something on his chart. He did not look at me once. Dr. Calloway thought Graves was a fool. He said as much. In the library, at the round table, over my scotch. He believed I was cursed, a blood hex, old work. The kind of thing that comes out of a feud between clans that has been simmering for 600 years. His treatment was worse. He burned incense made from crushed bone and dead nettle. The smoke filled my room until I could not breathe, until the air itself tasted of the grave, and he fed me a tincture. Ground meteorite, wolfsbane. A foul black liquid he tipped between my lips while I gagged. I could not swallow. My body had stopped cooperating with such simple things. The liquid pooled in my throat, and I began to choke on it. And Calloway, that ancient arrogant fool, leaned in closer and demanded I swallow more. My eyes rolled back. The room went dim, and then a voice cut through everything. Stop. The room went silent. Dead silent. The kind of silence you could cut yourself on. It was the girl. Calloway turned. Slow, his eyes flashing that yellow Arcane shows when the old hunger wakes. He looked at her the way a wolf looks at something small. What did you say? Human? She was trembling. I could see it from the bed. She clutched the silver tray to her chest like a shield, which it was not, which would not have stopped him for a heartbeat. He's choking, her voice cracked. You're drowning him. Can't you see? He can't swallow, and something in me, something buried under all that ash and rot, rose up. I pushed myself onto one elbow. God, the effort of it. My fangs came down despite the weakness. Despite everything, she is right. My voice was gravel. Get out. All of you. Leave me, they bristled. 12 proud men, and they bristled like scolded boys. But they went, muttering about the stubbornness of dying kings, muttering as if I could not hear them, which I could. I always could. Vane lingered in the doorway. He gave the girl a long look. Unreadable. Then he followed the others out. I did not understand that look then. I understand it now. He was measuring her, alone, the room dim, the incense still bitter in the air. I collapsed back onto the pillows, my chest heaving, and the girl, against every rule in that house, came to my side. She poured water, clean, cool water. From the pitcher they kept for show, I was only permitted blood. She poured the water anyway. She lifted my head. She let me drink. Do you understand what that was? A human. In a house of monsters, breaking every rule she had been given. To give a dying predator a sip of water. You are very brave, Cora. Her breath caught. I felt it against my hand because I knew her name, and she had not known that I knew. I had learned it the way I learned everything now. By listening, by watching, by having nothing left to do but pay attention to the one person in that house who treated me like a man instead of Stain. She wiped the black residue from my chin. Gentle. So gentle. And then she said the thing I have never forgotten. They aren't looking at you. My lord? Her voice trembled, but the words were steady. They're looking at their charts, their books, their own reflections. But they aren't looking at you. I closed my eyes, 400 years, 12 of the finest minds in the world. And it took a girl with a mop to say the one true thing that anyone had said in that entire cursed house. She had no idea how right she was, neither did I. Not yet, but the seed was planted, and in the dark soil of that dying house it had already begun to grow. There was worse to come before the truth. I have to tell you about the third one, because it is the night I nearly broke, and the night she nearly did. There was a doctor among the 12. I will not name him. He does not deserve the ink. He had a theory grander than the rest, that the answer was not medicine and not magic, but both at once, that my body needed to be emptied and refilled, drained to the edge of death and then flooded with new blood, new plasma, a full and total replacement of everything I was. The others thought him mad, but I was days from the ash. And a house that is out of answers will let a madman try the last one. They drained me, slow, over hours. I felt myself going out like a tide, and Cora stood in the corner with her tray, ordered to be there, ordered to hand them what they asked for, ordered to watch. And I watched her watch. I watched her hands shake so badly, she nearly dropped the instruments. I watched her look at the door and look at me, and understand that if she spoke again, if she said stop again, they might simply have her removed. And then no one would be watching me at all. So she stayed silent, and it cost her. God, I could see what it cost her. To stand there and hand a madman the tools he was using to kill me, and say nothing. Because saying nothing was the only way she could keep her place in that room. And her place in that room was the only thing keeping me tethered to the world. They flooded me back with their new blood. And of course it was the same poisoned blood, the same silver-lined bags. I did not know that yet. I only knew that when it was over I was worse than I had ever been, that the black had reached my throat, that I could no longer feel my own legs, and when they finally left. When the room was empty but for the two of us, she came to me, and she did not speak. She just took my hand, and she held it, and I felt something wet fall on my wrist. She was crying, silently, so that no one would hear, even now, even alone. She had learned to grieve without sound in that house, and I could not comfort her. I could not lift my hand to wipe her face. I could barely form the word. But I said it, Cora, and she looked at me. Not yet, I whispered. It was all I had. 2 words. Not yet. I did not know then how right I would be, but she held on to those 2 words. She told me later, through everything that came after. Not yet, not yet. Then, one night, the 12 met in the library, and I heard the verdict come up through the floor. Consensus. That was the word they used. As if my death were a matter to be voted on, the king's body was rejecting all sustenance. Cellular regeneration had failed. He has at most a week to live. A week, 400 years, and they had given me a week. I heard, in the days that followed, the sounds of a house preparing for a funeral it did not yet dare to name. I heard Vane's voice in the halls, smooth and low, making arrangements, speaking of transition, of succession, of order in the dark world. His grief, they said, was terrible to behold, barely held in check beneath the weight of all the logistics a vampiric succession requires. His grief, remember that word, his grief. Hold it up to the light later, when you know what I know, and see how it turns to something else in your hand. But while 12 great men prepared my grave, and while my oldest friend arranged my throne, there was a girl in my room, every waking hour, refusing. She would not accept it. I did not know that at first. I was too far gone to know much of anything. But I know it now, because I have pieced it together, and because she told me later, in the quiet after the storm, she would not accept that I was dying. She spent every hour she was allowed, and many she was not, in my chamber. She changed the sheets. She scrubbed the floors. She handled the medical waste the doctors would not touch with their own gloved hands. And because she was the one doing those things, the low things, the invisible things, the things 12 brilliant men considered beneath them, she was the one who noticed. Here's what you must understand about Cora Bell. She had grown up fixing what was broken with whatever was at hand. Duct tape, baling wire, stubbornness. She had kept a sick sister alive on nothing. She had learned, young, to look at a broken thing not as a mystery but as a machine. What piece is wrong? What piece can be fixed? The doctors assumed my problem was vast, ancient, magical. Beyond understanding, Cora looked at it like a broken washing machine. And a broken washing machine always has a simple, stupid, physical cause. If you are humble enough to look for it, it started with the blood bags. I was being fed the finest blood in the world. Elite donors, willing, kept on strict organic diets. Their blood drawn and processed in the state-of-the-art laboratory in the cellars, then brought up sealed, vacuum sealed, sterile, the best blood money could buy. And it was killing me. though no one knew that, not yet. Not even her. One night, late, she was organizing the medical cart by my bed. I was drifting, half in the dark, and she dropped one of the empty eggs. It slipped from her fingers and fell to the marble floor. A small thing, a nothing. She knelt to pick it up, and she went still. I felt it, even in my fog. That total stillness that had come over her the first night, when I apologized, that deer-at-the-road stillness. That held-breath silence of a person whose whole world has just tilted a single degree on its axis. She brought the bag to her face. Slowly, she breathed in. I watched her from the bed. My clouded eyes could barely make out her shape. But I could see that much. I could see her frown. I could see her go to the refrigeration unit and pull out a fresh bag. Sealed. Full. I could see her uncap the port and breathe that in too, and I could see her hand begin to shake. She looked at me then. She thought I was sleeping. She looked at my black veins. She looked at my cracking skin, and on her face I saw something I had not seen on any face in that house in all the long weeks of my dying. Not pity, not grief, not the practiced sorrow of men writing a death certificate. I saw understanding. She had spent 2 years as a silversmith's apprentice, before the bills took even that from her. She knew metal. She knew its scent the way a baker knows flour, the way a sailor knows the sea, and what she smelled in that blood was not blood. It was a sharp, bitter, metallic tang, faint, almost buried under the heavy iron of the blood itself, but there, unmistakable, to her, and to no one else in that entire house of geniuses, the scent of tarnished silver, the oldest poison there is, to a creature like me, a slow necrosis, a death by inches, and it was in my blood. In the very thing that was supposed to keep me alive. She did not understand all of it yet. She could not have. She did not know who. She did not know how. But she knew this much, and I saw her know it. In the dim of my chamber, with an empty bag in her trembling hand, I was not dying of a curse. I was not dying of a disease. I was not dying of anything the finest minds in the world could name. I was being poisoned. She set the bag down, careful, so careful, as if it might wake and bite. She smoothed the sheet near my hand. She did not speak. But I saw her jaw set. I saw something come into her eyes that I would come to know very well. I closed my eyes and let her think I slept. And in the dark behind my own ruined vision, for the first time since the tremor took my hand on the night of the solstice, I felt something I had almost forgotten how to feel. I felt hope. But she did not act that night, and I have thought since about why. Because it would have been easy to tell it as a story of a girl who saw the truth and leapt. That is not what happened. What happened is harder and more human. She went back to her narrow room, and she sat on the edge of her bed, and she thought about Grace. She told me all of this later, in the quiet. So I could tell it to you now the way it was. She thought about her sister, 12 years old, sleeping, that very moment, in a facility 1,000 miles away that Cora's paycheck kept the lights on in. She thought about what happened to Grace if Cora vanished, if Cora accused the wrong man, if Cora accused the right one without proof, and was quietly removed from the world between one shift and the next. The way people are removed from houses like Ravensholt, Grace would have no one. Grace would be moved to a public ward. Grace would decline. Grace would die, slowly, in a room with bad light, while her sister lay in an unmarked grave on a cold mountain that no one would ever connect to the missing girl. That was the arithmetic. That was what she held in her hands that night. A dying stranger who had apologized to her once. Against her own sister's life. And here is the thing. Here is the thing about Cora Bell that I did not understand until much later, and that I have spent the years since trying to be worthy of. She did not choose the safe thing, but she did not choose it lightly either, the way a hero in a story chooses. She sat with it, all night. She wept. She was afraid. She nearly talked herself out of it a dozen times. And in the end she chose the dying stranger. Not because it was easy. Because it was right, and because she had decided, somewhere in that long, dark night, that a person who could smell a murder and say nothing was not a person she could stand to be, even to save herself. Even, God help her, to save her sister. She would find another way to keep Grace safe. She did not know how yet, but she would not buy her sister's safety with another person's murder. That was the line. That was where Cora Bell drew it. I have known kings who could not draw a line like that. I have known saints who could not. A frightened girl with a mop drew it. In the dark, alone, with everything to lose, and then she got up, and she wiped her face. And she went to find the truth. She did not sleep at all that night. By dawn she had a plan. A terrible, dangerous, half-mad plan. But a plan, a smell was a hunch. A hunch was not proof. If she went to anyone with a story about a bad smell in the blood bags, they would laugh her out of the house. or worse, so she needed proof. Hard proof, the kind you can hold in your hand and not argue with, which meant the cellars, which meant the blood bank, which meant the one place in the house a servant girl had no business being. Let me tell you about the cellars of Ravensholt. Because I built them, and I know what they were. They were the beating heart of the estate. Below the wine vaults, below the old dungeons that no longer held anything but memory, there was a level that did not appear on any architect's drawing, a modern level. Stainless steel and white light and the constant, bone-deep hum of refrigeration, the blood bank. It was the one place in the house that felt nothing like the house. Everywhere above was black oak and old stone and 400 years of shadow. Down there it was clinical, cold, bright as a surgeon's table, rows of steel units the size of coffins. Humming. Holding the lifeblood of my entire court, it was guarded, always. And it was the last place on earth a servant girl had any business being, which is exactly where she went. But before I tell you what she found, let me tell you about the man she was walking toward. The man whose name was on the paper she was about to steal. Because you cannot understand the weight of that betrayal unless you understand what he had been to me. Let me take you back. 300 years. To a night that smelled of smoke, I found Sebastian Vane in a burning chapel. It was a bad century. One of the worst. There were hunters then. Organized, fanatical. They had learned to move against us in daylight when we were weak, and they had cornered a young one. Barely 50 years turned. Practically a child by our reckoning. They had chained him inside a stone chapel and set it alight, and they were standing outside singing while it burned, waiting for the sun and the fire to finish him between them. I did not know him. I owed him nothing. I had every reason to pass by. A wise creature does not walk into a trap laid for his own kind. I went in anyway. I do not entirely know why, even now. Some ember of the thing I had been before the centuries made me cold. I tore the door from its hinges. I walked through fire that would have ended a younger vampire. I found him chained to the altars, screaming, his skin already smoking. And I broke the chains, and I carried him out through the singing men, and I made them stop singing one by one, and I do not need to tell you how. I brought him home. To Ravensholt. I nursed him back from ash, not unlike the ash I would one day become. I gave him a name in my house, a place at my side. I taught him everything. How to move through the human world unseen, how to rule, how to survive the long centuries without losing the last of yourself to the cold. I gave him 300 years of trust. I gave him my secrets, my strategies, the names of my enemies and the locations of my weaknesses. I gave him, in the end, the keys to everything I was, and I never once, in 300 years, thought to ask whether the boy I pulled from the fire had grown into a man who resented the hand that pulled him. That is the flashback I want you to hold. That is what was walking toward the cellars in the shape of a signature on a manifest. Not just a traitor, my traitor, the one I made, the one I saved, the one I loved in the cold way a creature like me can love, which I had thought was enough, and which had never once, in 300 years, been enough for him. Cora did not know any of that. She only knew there was a name on a paper and that she had to find it. She waited until her shift ended. She did not go back to her room. Instead, she slipped into the laundry, where the supervisor kept a ring of heavy iron keys in an unlocked drawer, because who would dare? Who would dare to steal from a house full of monsters? Cora Bell would dare. For her sister. For the dying man upstairs who had apologized for the mess. She took the key. Her hand shook. She told me that. Her hand shook so hard the keys rattled, and she had to press them against her stomach to silence them, and then she went down, into the dark, into the cold, into the one part of my house where the truth was kept. The guard desk at the bottom of the stair was empty. She nearly wept with relief. The night guards were on their perimeter rounds. She had timed it without knowing she was timing it. All those months of noticing the rhythms of the house, the habit of the powerless. It was paying a debt she had not known she was owed. She slipped past the empty desk, into the primary processing lab. The heavy pneumatic doors sighed shut behind her, and there she was, a girl with a stolen key, standing in the coldest, brightest, most forbidden room in the house of Lord Aldrich Vaymont, alone. With the hum of 100 bags of blood, she did not freeze. That is the thing about her. She was terrified. Her whole body was terror. And she did not freeze. She went to work. There was a terminal on a peripheral desk. She had watched a guard log into 1 week before. She had stood behind him with a tray, invisible, being nothing, and she had memorized the guest credentials he typed with one blunt finger. She had not known why she was memorizing them. She just did. She was the kind of person who noticed the shape of a lock. In case she ever needed the door, she typed them in now. The screen woke. Green light on her frightened face. She found the supply manifests. Rows and rows of them. Cold data in cold columns. She did not know what she was looking for. She only knew she would know it when she saw it, and then she saw it. 3 months ago. 3 months. The exact edge of the winter solstice. The exact night my hand first trembled over that glass. The exact beginning of the end of me. 3 months ago, the estate had changed its blood bag supplier. For 100 years, the intravenous bags had come from a firm in Geneva, a reputable house, run by my own kind, trusted through generations. Their contract was airtight and their product was flawless. And 3 months ago, that contract had been terminated. Abruptly, without cause. By whom? Cora leaned toward Eve. Her breath fogged in the cold, and she read the name of the man who had signed the termination, Lord Sebastian Vane. She did not know the weight of that name yet. She did not know he was my oldest friend, my most trusted advisor, the man who had summoned the doctors, arranged the treatments, and now, quietly, in the grieving dark, arranged my funeral. She only knew that the man who had changed the supplier had signed his own name to the exact moment the king began to die, and that the new supplier had a name that meant nothing. Apex Medical Solutions, a domestic shell, no history, no reputation, a company that appeared out of nowhere 3 months ago. Sold my house the bags that were killing me, and would no doubt vanish just as cleanly the moment I was ash. She printed the manifest. The machine wheezed to life in the silent lab, and she nearly screamed. But it printed, and she folded the paper and pressed it to her chest like a second heartbeat. A smell was a hunch, a signature was a thread. But she wanted the metal. She wanted the thing you cannot argue with. She went to the nearest refrigeration unit. She opened it. Cold air rolled out around her ankles like fog off the peaks. She pulled a fresh bag, the Apex logo bright in the corner, and she carried it to the chemical station along the far wall. And here is where her whole strange life bent toward this one moment. Here is where the debt, and the sick sister, and the silversmith's shop she had been forced to leave, all came together into something that mattered. She did not need a medical degree. She needed the acid test for silver, the first thing any apprentice learns, the oldest test there is. She drew a small sample of the blood into a glass beaker, her hands steady now. Strange, she told me, how the fear left her hands the moment they had a job to do. She reached for the nitric acid on the lab supply shelf. She added a few drops, and she watched. If silver is present, the liquid turns cloudy, milky. White as bone, she held her breath. The lab hummed. The units breathed their cold breath around her, and in the beaker, slow, insidious, undeniable, a milky white precipitate began to form. Silver. The bags were not just holding blood, their interior lining, the thin plastic membrane against which every drop of my sustenance rested, was coated with a microscopic film of silver nitrate. Every bag, every feeding, every night for 3 months. A slow, patient, invisible assassination, delivered by the very treatment meant to save me, poured into my veins by the hands of men who thought they were healing me. She had it now. The metal. The thing you cannot argue with. And that was the exact moment the doors hissed open. She dropped instinct, pure animal instinct. She threw herself beneath the steel counter and pressed the printed manifest to her chest and made herself smaller. Nothing. A ghost again. Please God, a ghost again. Footsteps on the tile. 2 sets. She could see from beneath the counter 2 pairs of shoes crossing the bright floor. 1 pair polished, fine leather, expensive. The other heavy work boots. Scuffed. Familiar. She knew those boots. She had seen them in the halls. Silas Marsh. The technician who ran the blood bank. The quiet man who never met your eyes. And the fine leather. She did not know it yet, but she was about to. The polished shoes stopped, and a voice came down through the cold air, smooth as silk, cultured, ancient, and dripping underneath the silk with something that made her skin crawl. The doctors are finalizing their death certificates. She did not breathe. They estimate he will turn to ash by tomorrow night. She did not breathe. Are all the remaining Apex bags disposed of? And Marsh. The boots, answered nervous, eager to please. Yes, my lord, I incinerated the last batch an hour ago. Good, once the king is gone. We switch back to the Geneva supplier. No one will ever know. The doctors are entirely convinced it was a cellular rejection cascade. A pause. And in that pause, Cora Bell understood everything. There was no curse. There was no disease. There was no rival clan. No mutated pathogen. No ancient hex out of the old country. There was only a plan. A cold, patient, brilliant plan. To murder a king, over 3 slow months, in a way that 12 of the finest minds in the world would sign off on as natural causes, and the man who had made it, The man in the fine leather shoes was standing 6 feet from her, praising his accomplice. Excellent. You have done well, Silas, the silk again. The smile she could hear in it, when I take the throne. Your loyalty will be rewarded. When I take the throne, she clamped her own hand over her own mouth, physically, pressed it there. Because a sound was trying to come out of her, and a sound would kill her, the throne. This was not about money. This was not about greed alone. This was a coup, a murder dressed as medicine, a crown lifted from a dying man's head by the very hand he trusted most. They left, and she waited 20 minutes, frozen, shaking, and then she came out from under the counter, on legs that barely held her, and she made for the door, and that is where it almost ended, because the door opened again, and Sebastian Vane came back. He had forgotten something, or he was thorough. Later I understood it was the second thing. He was always thorough. That was what made him so nearly perfect. He had come back to be sure the incinerator log matched the manifest, to leave no thread, and he found a servant girl standing in the middle of his murder. I have imagined this moment 10,000 times. The girl who saved my life, alone in a cold, bright room, 6 feet from the man who had killed me, with the proof of his crime folded against her heart. He looked at her. She looked at him. You, he said. Mild. Curious, not yet alarmed. The king's girl. What are you doing down here? And here is where 3 months of being a ghost saved her life because she did not panic. She did not run. She did the thing she had trained herself, without knowing it, to do. She became nothing. She let her shoulders round. She let her eyes drop to the floor. She let her voice go small and dull and stupid. Supply run, my lord. She lifted the empty tray in her hand, the one prop she had, for the sick room. They sent me for clean waste bags. I couldn't find the guard. I'm sorry, my lord. I'll go back up. I'll wait for the guard, ping. His eyes narrowed. At this hour? They said it was urgent, my lord. For the mess. Her voice cracked on the word, and she let it. She let him think the crack was fear of him. It was not. It was the word. The mess. His mess. I'm sorry. I'll go. A silence. Long. Terrible. She told me she counted her own heartbeats in it. She got to 11. Vane, who could compel any human alive, reached out with his will, that cold pressure, and tried to press into her mind, to see if she was lying, to pull the truth from her eyes, and it ran off her like water off stone. He felt nothing. He read nothing, because there was nothing to read. She was the one human in the house he could not reach into, and he had forgotten it, because he had decided months ago that she was beneath his notice, that her strange immunity was a curiosity, not a threat. A servant who could not be compelled was a servant who could not be turned into a spy. He never once considered she might be a spy who needed no turning. So when he could not read her, he did what arrogant men do. He filled the silence with his own certainty. He decided she was exactly what she appeared to be. A dull, frightened, exhausted girl on a pointless errand. Nothing. A ghost, get out, he said, and do not come down here again. The cellars are not for servants. Yes, my lord. Thank you, my lord, and she went. Slow, shuffling, nothing. Every step a scream held behind her teeth. Up the stair, down the hall, around the corner, and then she ran. Now let me tell you about that same night. From where I lay, because I was dying, in earnest, in those hours. This was the night the doctors had marked. The night I was meant to become the ash they had already fitted an urn for. I was so far gone I barely knew my own name. The black had reached my throat. My lucid moments came lightning now, brief, blinding, then dark again. I was ready. I want you to understand that. 400 years, and I was ready. And then the doors burst open. She came into my room like a storm. She dropped to her knees beside my bed, and she grabbed my cold, trembling hand in both of hers. My lord, a whisper. Fierce. Aldrich, wake up. Please. My eyelids fluttered. The milky ruin of my eyes turned toward the sound. Cora, barely a breath. It was all I had. You are not dying of an illness. I did not understand. You are being murdered, and she slammed a piece of paper down on the table by my bed. A printed manifest, the name of a shell company. The signature of my oldest friend. Vane changed the blood bags. Her voice shook and did not stop. They're lined with silver nitrate. The doctors missed it. Because it's not magic, it's not a disease. It's poison, it's silver, and Vane did it. Vane. Something moved in me then. I felt it come up from the deep cold place where the last of me still lived, an ember. Ancient, terrible. Sebastian Vane, 300 years. I had pulled him from a burning chapel. I had made him what he was. I had trusted him with my court, my secrets, my throne, my life. I had literally, in the end, trusted him with my life. And he had spent 3 patient months, feeding it to me. One sealed bag at a time, a sound came out of me. Half a laugh. Half a thing with no name, my oldest friend, and I am too weak to tear his throat out and the ember guttered. Because it was true, the rage was there. But the body was gone. Cora saw it. She saw the fury rise, and the body fail to answer it, and she did not despair. She did the thing she always did. She looked for the piece that was broken and asked how to fix it. You need clean blood. Her voice dropped, urgent, steady, pure blood, untouched by plastic, untouched by their lab. Enough to hold you through the night, enough to start flushing the silver out. The reserves, I choke the words, are tainted. All of them, not all of them. And she did a thing I will remember when everything else about my long life has faded to nothing. She unbuttoned the cuff of her uniform. She rolled up her sleeve. She bared her pale, fragile wrist, and she pressed it to my cracked and dying lips. I'm O-negative, a whisper, but an iron whisper. I'm clean. Drink? I turned my head away. It took everything I had, but I turned it away. No, a breath. I will drain you. I am starving. I have not fed on the living in 100 years, and I will not stop. I will kill you. I survived debt collectors, her voice hard as struck steel. I survived hospitals that wanted my sister to die because we couldn't pay. I am not fragile, Aldrich. Cora, drink? She pressed her wrist harder against my mouth. Or vain wins. Drink, and take your throne back, and God forgive me. God forgive me for what I have done in 400 years, and God forgive me most of all for this. Because I was weak, because I was dying. Because a girl I barely knew was offering me her life and telling me it was the only way. I yielded. My fangs came down, and I caught her wrist, and for the first time in 3 long months my grip had strength in it. A fraction of the old terror. Enough. And I bit down. She gasped. I felt her knees buckle beside the bed. The pain of it. I know, the pain of it. The first bite is always fire before it is anything else, but then the venom did its work, the way it is meant to, and the fire became something warmer, heavier. That strange dark peace we give to those we feed on, so that the lamb does not struggle. She sagged against the bed, and I drank, and oh, what she was clean. She was so clean. Warm and living and utterly, perfectly untouched by the poison that had been eating me for 3 months. Her blood went into me like the first light of a spring I had thought I would never see again. And I felt it work. I felt the black in my veins begin to thin. Diluted, drop, by the pure thing flooding into me. I felt the lazy, dying rhythm of my heart begin to pick up. From a slow, distant drag to a strong and steady drum, I felt the silver begin to loosen its grip. Driven out through my skin in a cold sweat that beaded and rolled and carried the poison with it, the cracked clay of my skin began to soften. The ash tone gave way, cell by cell, to the pale, luminous perfection of my true nature. The dark map of dead veins began to fade. The black rivers running clear. I drank, and I came back to life, one swallow at a time. And somewhere in the middle of it, the starving thing in me wanted more, wanted all of it, wanted to take and take until there was nothing left of the girl to take from, and I stopped. I pulled back. I tore myself away from the greatest gift I had ever been given, because she had not offered me her death. She had offered me her life, and I would not turn one into the other. Not her, never her. I was panting, my chest heaving, but when I opened my eyes they opened clear. The milky film was gone. I could see. For the first time in weeks I could see. The room in sharp, perfect detail. The machines, the paper on the table, and her Cora swayed. The blood loss hit her all at once. Her eyes rolled, and she began to fall. I caught her who could not lift my own head an hour before. Caught her before she touched the floor. My strength was back. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to lift her like she weighed nothing, and lay her gently on the velvet settee across the room. I bit my own wrist. I smeared a drop of my blood. Purified now, immortal again. Over the 2 small wounds on her arm, they sealed at once, closed to 2 faint pink scars, there, and then nearly gone. She stirred, weak, pale, but alive, so alive, and I knelt beside her, I a king, 400 years old. Knelt on the marble beside a servant girl, and I lifted her hand, and I pressed my lips to her knuckles. You have given me my life, Cora, my voice. It had changed. The gravel was gone. In its place was the old thing. The deep, dark, resonant power that had made kings kneel and cities fall silent. It was back. She had given it back to me. Her eyes fluttered open. Found mine. You have given me my vengeance, she swallowed. Weak, but her mind, her sharp, unbreakable, machine-fixing mind, was already turning. Vane thinks you'll be ash by tomorrow night, a whisper. The doctors are coming. To pronounce you dead, and a smile spread across my face. The first true smile in 3 months. I felt it stretch my healing skin. I felt my fangs behind it. Then we mustn't disappoint them. I rose. To my full height. For the first time since the solstice, and the shadow I cast across that room was the shadow of the thing I had always been. Returned from the very edge of the dark, we must give them a show. Now understand what we did in the hours that followed. Because it was the finest work of my long life, and I did it with a girl who 3 months before had never heard my name. We had a night and a day before the doctors came with their ledger and their urn. And in that time we built a trap. Cora hid in the dressing room that adjoined my chamber. And through the day, in secret and small careful measures, she gave me more. Not enough to harm her, never that, just enough. Small controlled feedings to speed the healing, to drive the last of the silver from my body, to bring back the strength I would need. She grew pale, she grew tired. And she did not complain. Not once. She gave me pieces of her life across those hours. And she wore my recovery on her own face like a fading candle, and every time I told her it was enough, she told me it was not. And she was right. Because a king rising from his deathbed to face a traitor cannot afford to be anything less than terrible. And I used 400 years of discipline to do the hardest thing of all. I played dead, I slowed my newly beating heart. Deliberate, cell by cell, breath by breath, I pulled it back down toward stillness. I masked my aura, that cold pressure the living feel around my kind, until a man could stand beside my bed and feel nothing at all. I lay perfectly still beneath the sheets, my skin arranged to look like ash, my eyes closed, my chest unmoving. But between those hours of playing the corpse, in the quiet, when she had strength to sit up and I had strength to speak, we talked, and it was in those hours that I began to understand what she truly was, and that she began to understand me. When they come, I told her, they will not simply believe I am dead because I am lying still. They will test. Graves will test. He is arrogant, but he is not a fool, so what do? We give him what he expects to find. A man expects to find what he is looking for. Graves is looking for a corpse. So we give him a corpse, the dark monitor, the cold skin, the stillness, every detail he expects. And because we give him the small things, he will not question the large one. She frowned. That frown I had come to love. The one that meant she was taking a thing apart in her head. That's what con men do, she said. My uncle was one. Small change so you don't watch the big bill? Your uncle, I said, would have made an excellent courtier. She almost laughed. It was the first almost law I had heard from her, and I found I wanted to hear the whole one. Someday, when we were not both nearly dead, and then I taught her a thing I have never taught anyone. Because I never trusted anyone enough. I taught her how to read a room the way my kind reads a room. Not the words. The words are the least of it. The weight of a man on his feet. The direction of his eyes when he lies. The half-second pause before a rehearsed grief. The tell in the hands. You already do this, I told her. You did it to Vane in the cellar. You made yourself small because you read that he wanted you small. You gave him the ghost he expected. That is not a servant's trick, Cora. That is a survivor's trick, and it is the same trick a king uses to hold a court. You have simply been using it to disappear. I am going to teach you to use it to see. And she learned. God, how she learned. In a night and a day, she learned things it takes my kind decades to feel. Because she had been practicing her whole life without knowing the name of the thing she practiced. The poor learn to read the powerful the way prey learns to read the weather. It is the same skill. It only lacked a teacher who would tell her it was a strength and not a shame. That is the thing I gave her in those hours. Not blood. She gave me the blood. I gave her permission. To know that the thing she had been all her life, the watcher, the reader, the one who saw, was not the mark of a servant, it was the mark of a queen. There was one more thing we did, and it was Cora's idea, not mine. My instinct was blood, was the throat, was the old red simple answer. Hers was paper. They'll say you imagined it, she said. Pale on the settee, pressing a cloth to her arm. A dying king, raving. Even after you rise, they'll whisper it was a fever dream. You need what I have. You need the proof they can't argue with. So while I gathered my strength, we gathered the rest. The manifest. She had that already. The termination of the Geneva contract with his name on it, the shell company, and the accounts it fed. And she showed me how to reach the recording. The security system in my own cellars had been listening the whole time. To Vane and Marsh. Congratulating each other over my grave. He had been so certain of his safety that he had confessed his murder 6 feet from a hidden microphone and a hiding girl. We had it all, every thread. Everything 12 Doctors' word could never have given me. But that cold, hard documents could. Midnight was coming, and with it, the doctors, and with them my oldest friend, in his sharp black suit and his borrowed grief, coming to watch a king turn to ash. They thought they were coming to a funeral. They were walking into a reckoning. Midnight came to Ravensholt the way it always did. Slow, cold, rolling down off the peaks in a tide of fog that pressed against the windows like something wanting in. I lay in my bed and I listened to it come. I had done many hard things in 400 years. I had waited out sieges. I had outlasted enemies who thought patience was a virtue only they possessed. But nothing in 4 centuries, was harder than lying in that bed and playing dead while the man who murdered me walked toward my door, because I could hear him. I could hear all of them. My senses were back, sharp as broken glass, and I lay there with my heart slowed to a whisper, and I listened to 12 pairs of feet climbing the winding stair, and 1 pair of fine leather shoes, among them, unhurried, certain, coming to collect a throne. Cora was in the dressing room, behind the door, close enough that I could hear her breathing. Too fast, too shallow. She was terrified, and she stayed. That is the thing I keep coming back to. Across all the years since, she was a girl with a dying sister and a mountain of debt and every reason in the world to run. And she stayed. In a house full of monsters, behind a thin wooden door. Because a dying man had once apologized to her for the mess. Stay still, I told myself. Not for me, for her, because if this went wrong, if I rose too soon, or too late, it would not be my ash they swept up in the morning, it would be hers. So I lay still, and I waited, and the doors opened. They came in slow, solemn, a procession of the defeated, pretending to be the dignified. I could see them without opening my eyes. I had learned to do that long ago, to map a room by sound and scent, and the small displacements of air. I knew exactly where each of them stood. Dr. Nathaniel Graves came first, the head of my council. The man who had told a servant girl to clean the blood off the sheets before the stains set. He carried a leather ledger, a death ledger. In it, I have no doubt, my name was already written. Waiting only for a time behind him, Dr. Osric Calloway, the ancient apothecary. He carried a silver urn, an urn, for my ashes. He had brought a container to hold what was left of me, and he carried it the way a man carries something he expects to fill, and the others, 9 more. Filing into my chamber to confirm a death they had failed to prevent, to sign their names to a lie they did not know was a lie, and behind them all, Sebastian Vane. He came last. He always understood staging, Vane. He knew how to enter a room. He was dressed already in mourning, a suit of black so sharp it could have cut, tailored perfect, grief made visible, and worn like a crown he had not yet earned, his face, that mask of tragic sorrow, the furrowed brow, the downcast eyes. The performance of a man losing his dearest friend. 300 years. I had known that face for 300 years, and I had never once, until that night, seen what was underneath it. Graves approached the bed. He looked at the heart monitor. It was dark, silent. Cora had disconnected it an hour before, so that no stray flicker of my restored heart would betray us. And then he did the thing I had warned her about. He tested. He leaned close. He watched my chest for breath. He held the back of his hand near my lips. He was thorough, Graves, in his arrogance, and he found exactly what he expected to find, because I had given it to him. No breath, no warmth, no flicker, a corpse. The small details, perfect. So he never questioned the large one. He straightened, his life signs have faded entirely, his voice flat, clinical. The voice of a man reading a weather report. The cellular breakdown is complete. And Vane. Oh, Vane. He stepped forward then. Smooth, slow. He came to the side of my bed, and he looked down at what he thought was my corpse, and he spoke, a tragedy, the silk. The venom underneath the silk, a king, cut down in his prime. By a curse we could not understand. His prime. 400 years old, and he called it my prime. This man who had counted out my death in sealed bags across 3 patient months. I shall assume the regency immediately. A pause. Just long enough to maintain order in the dark world. And there it was, the whole thing, the entire architecture of the crime. Spoken aloud over the body of the man he had killed. The murder dressed as medicine. The coup dressed as duty. I shall assume the regency immediately. He could not even wait for the body to be cold. He had to reach for the crown while it was still warm on the dead man's head. And that was the moment. That was the exact moment I had been waiting for. Because a trap is not sprung when the prey enters the room. A trap is sprung when the prey is certain it is safe. I opened my eyes. I did not move. Not yet. I simply spoke. From the bed. From beneath the sheet they thought was my shroud. In a voice that filled the room like cold water filling a grave. You always were impatient, Sebastian. The room died. I have witnessed a great many silences in 400 years. The silence of a battlefield after the last man falls. The silence of a cathedral at the moment of a lie. But none of them compared to this. 12 of the finest minds in the world. Frozen. Every one of them. like a painting of men. Like the photograph of the instant before a scream, Dr. Calloway dropped the urn. It fell from his ancient hands and it struck the marble floor and it rang. A high, terrible, ringing clatter that went on in that dead silent room. The empty vessel that had been brought to hold my ashes, rolling across the floor, empty, because there would be no ashes tonight, and vain. I turned my head, slow, deliberate, and I looked at him, his face. 300 years I had known that face, and in 300 years I had never seen what I saw in it now. Terror, pure, unmasked, absolute. The grief fell off him like the costume it was, and underneath was a naked animal fear that I will treasure until the end of my long existence. My Lord Graves. Stammering, backing away so fast he crashed into the medical tray and sent a cascade of steel instruments clattering to the floor. This is impossible. Your genome. It was collapsing. We all tested. This cannot. I pushed aside the heavy velvet blankets and I rose slow. Because slow was terrible, and I wanted them to feel every second of it. I sat up. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. My bare feet touched the cold marble, and I stood, not the rotting thing they had come to bury, not the cracked and ashen ruin that had lain in that bed for 3 months while they debated its fate over my scotch. I stood as myself, as I had not stood since the winter solstice, my skin luminous, flawless, my deep vibrant sapphire they had been for 4 centuries. My strength coiled in me like a spring wound to breaking. I was the immortal Lord Aldrich Vaymont, and I was very much alive. My genome, I said, is perfectly fine, Nathaniel. I took a step toward them. My bare feet made no sound on the marble. 400 years of the hunt in a single silent step. It always was. I let them look at me. I let the truth of it settle into their brilliant, useless minds. I let them understand that everything they had believed for 3 months was a lie, and that they had been the instruments of it, and that the king they had helped to bury was standing before them whole. My genome was never the problem, my voice low, even, terrible in its calm. My choice in advisors was the problem, and I turned, full on, to Vane. He moved. Of course he moved. He was 300 years old, and he was fast, and he knew, in the single instant our eyes met, that his life was measured now in heartbeats. He turned for the doors. A blur, there and gone, but I was older, and I was stronger. And I was fueled by 300 years of a trust so complete that its betrayal had lit a fire in me hotter than anything the silver had ever done. I crossed the room before he reached the door. I did not blur. I did not need to. I was simply there, between him and his escape, and my hand was around his throat, and I lifted him, off his feet, 3 feet off the ground, and I slammed him against the reinforced oak doors of my chamber. The wood splintered. The whole frame shuddered. Dust rained from the lintel, and I held him there, my oldest friend, kicking, choking, clawing at my wrist with 3 centuries of strength that meant nothing against my restored fury. Silver nitrate, I said, quiet just for him, in the blood supply. His eyes bulged. I watched the last of the mask fall away. I watched him understand exactly how much I knew. A human, I said, deduced in 3 months, what 12 of the greatest medical minds in our world could not see in 3 months of trying. I turned my head. I looked at them, the doctors, huddled together against the far wall like sheep who have just seen the wolf they have been feeding. You looked at charts. You looked at magic. You looked at curses and pathogens and the collapse of an ancient bloodline. You looked everywhere. Everything in this world and the other. Everything except the truth, sitting in the bag you hung on my arm every single night. I let Vane drop. Not far. Just enough. His feet found the floor and his knees buckled, and he sagged against the splintered doors. One hand at his crushed throat. Gasping, I stepped back from him. And I addressed my court one last time. Get out of my house. They did not move. Frozen. Terrified. Uncertain. All of you. The words came out of me like the closing of a tomb. Now, and they ran, 12 of the finest minds in the world. They scrambled over one another to escape my chamber. They left their instruments, their charts, their ledgers. Graves left his death ledger open on the floor, my name written in it, waiting for a time that would now never come. They ran from the king they had come to bury, and I let them go. I want you to understand why I let them go. Because this is the heart of it. This is the thing I most want you to carry away from this story. I could have killed them. Everyone. 12 doctors who had spent 3 months torturing me with their treatments, while a girl with a bucket saw the truth they were too proud to see. I could have torn through all 12 of them in the time it takes to draw a breath. I did not. Because they were fools, not murderers. Because their crime was arrogance, not treason. Because a king who kills every man who fails him is not a king. He is only a different kind of monster. And because I had learned something in 3 months of dying that 400 years of ruling had never taught me. The measure of a man is not the enemies he destroys. It is what he does with the power to destroy them. But there was one man in that room whose crime was not arrogance. I turned back to Sebastian Vane. He had pushed himself up against the ruined doors. He was looking at me, and the fear was still there, yes. But under it now, rising, was the thing that had driven him all along. The ambition, the resentment, the 300 years of standing just behind the throne. Close enough to want it, never close enough to have it. You should have let me have it, he rasped. You had 4 centuries, and you would have had 4 more. And I would have stood behind you for every single one of them, in your shadow, cleaning up your messes, waiting, so you decided to stop waiting. I decided, he spat, to stop kneeling, and there it was, the whole of it. 300 years of a friendship I had believed in, and underneath it, all along, a man on his knees who hated the floor. I pulled you out of a burning chapel, I said, and my voice was quieter now. Because this was the wound. This was the true wound, deeper than the silver. Do you remember? You were 50 years turned. They had you chained to an altar, and I walked through the fire. For a stranger, I owed you nothing. And I walked through the fire, I remember, he said. And for one moment, one single moment, something human moved behind his eyes. I remember every day of it. Then how? Because you never let me forget it. And now the venom was back, and under it, the old rot finally in the light. 300 years, Aldrich. 300 years of being the boy you saved. The project. The thing you made. Do you know what it is to owe a debt that can never be paid? To stand beside a man who gave you everything, and know that everything you are belongs to him? I did not want your throne because I hated you. I wanted it because it was the only thing in this world that would finally, not be a gift from your hand, and that. I will not lie to you. That landed because there was a splinter of truth in it. Buried in all the poison, I had saved him. And I had never once, in 300 years, let it be an ordinary thing between us. I had loved him the way you love a thing you rescued. Which is to say, from above. From the height of the one who did the rescuing. I had never once climbed down to stand beside him as an equal. Because it had never once occurred to me that he was one. I had made the same mistake with Vane that the whole world made with Cora. I had decided what he was, and then I had stopped looking. But a wound is not a permit. A grievance is not a justification. Half the evil in this world is done by men who were, at some point, genuinely wronged. And decided that their pain was a license to become the thing that wronged them. You could have told me this, I said. Any night in 300 years, you could have said, Aldrich, I am drowning in your gratitude. You could have asked to leave. You could have asked to be free of me. I would have given it. Do you understand? The one thing you say you wanted, your freedom from my hand. I would have handed it to you gladly. All you had to do was ask. He said nothing. Instead, you poisoned me in my sleep. 1 bag at a time. And you called it patience. And you dressed it up as grief, and you practiced your sorrow in the mirror. You did not want freedom, Sebastian. A man who wants freedom walks out the door. You wanted the throne. And you wanted me not to see you take it. And here is where the story could have ended one way. The old way. The way 400 years of my nature demanded. I could have killed him. There, against the splintered doors. Snapped his neck, and thrown the body aside like a broken doll. Some part of me wanted to. The oldest part. The part the silver had nearly killed, and that Cora's blood had brought roaring back to life. And then a door opened behind me, the dressing room, and Cora Bell stepped out of the shadows, pale, unsteady. Her sleeves still rolled up over the fading marks on her arm. She had heard everything. She had waded through everything. Behind that thin door, terrified, and she had not run, and she looked at me. And she looked at Vane crumpled against the doors. And she did not say a word, but her eyes said something. Her eyes said, you are better than this. Her eyes said, do not become the thing he made you. In the last moment before you win, I looked at her. This girl who had turned out to be the only real thing in my entire kingdom, and I let go of the oldest part of me. I turned back to Vane. And I did not kill him. No, I said. That is what you would do. That is what you did. You solved your problems in the dark. With poison. Where no one could see, I straightened. I am going to solve mine in the light. Where everyone can, because I had understood something. Standing there, something Cora had shown me without a single word. Killing Vane would have been mercy. A snapped neck, a quick dark, an ending he could not feel for long. Justice was worse. Justice meant living. Justice meant the truth, spoken aloud, in front of everyone. Justice meant Sebastian Vane stripped of everything he had murdered to obtain, and left alive to watch a servant girl take it all from him. Silas Marsh, I said. Vane went still, the manifests. The signature terminating the Geneva contract. The recording of your voice in my own cellars, praising your accomplice for a murder well done. I let each one fall like a stone. The Shell Company, Apex Medical Solutions, which will lead, when my people follow it, directly back to accounts that bear your name. You built a perfect crime, Sebastian, I said. Perfect enough to fool 12 geniuses. And you were undone by the one person in this house you decided was beneath your notice. Vane's eyes moved to Cora, and in them I saw, at last, the full and total comprehension of his ruin. He had accounted for everything, every powerful man, every clever mind, every threat that wore a title or carried a weapon. He had not accounted for a servant with a conscience. Her, he whispered. Her, I said. The Council of the Dark World convened 3 nights later. I called them myself. The old bloodlines, the clan heads, the ancient powers who govern our kind from the shadows, who had known me for centuries, who had heard in the last weeks that Lord Aldrich Vaymont was dying of a curse, and that his advisor Sebastian Vane would soon assume his seat. They came to Ravensholt expecting a funeral. They found me on my throne, whole, restored, and beside me, standing where no servant had ever stood, a girl in a plain dark dress with faint pink scars on her wrist. Understand what that room was. 12 of the oldest and most dangerous beings on the earth. Creatures who had watched empires rise and fall like tides. Creatures who did not believe in miracles because they had lived long enough to see the machinery behind everyone. And they looked at me, restored from a death they had all heard was certain, and even they, went quiet. I laid it all before them. Every proof, the manifests, the recording, the chemical tests, the signature, the trail of accounts. I laid Sebastian Vane's perfect crime out on the table of the Dark Council, thread by thread, and I let them see it whole. Vane was brought before them in chains. Silver chains. There is a justice in that I did not have to arrange, and he did not grovel. I will give him that. He had lost, and he knew it, and he wore his ruin with the same cold poise he had worn everything else. One of the old ones. A creature older than me, older than nearly anything. Turned her ancient eyes on Cora, and she asked the only question that mattered to a room like that. The human found it. The thing 12 of our finest could not. How? And the room turned to look at the girl. All those ancient eyes. The full weight of the dark world, focused on a 23-year-old with a healing wound on her arm. And Cora Bell, who 3 months before had been ordered never to meet a guest's eyes, lifted her chin, and met the eyes of the oldest predator in the world, and answered, "Because I was the one cleaning the room," she said. "You pay people to be invisible. And then you're surprised when the invisible ones are the only ones who see. Silence. And then the old one did a thing I had never seen her do in 400 years. She inclined her head. To a human. A small bow. Of respect. And I knew, in that moment, that whatever happened next, the dark world would never again be quite so certain that power and sight were the same thing. Then I let them judge him. I did not have to. I could have ended him myself, by our oldest laws, and no one would have questioned it. But I wanted witnesses. I wanted the whole dark world to know exactly what he had done, and exactly how he had been caught, and exactly who had caught him. Because a king who is murdered in secret and avenged in secret has learned nothing, but a king who drags the whole thing into the light, who says, "Here, look, this is what betrayal looks like, and this is what it costs. And this is who saw it when the wise men could not." That king has taught a lesson that will outlast him by 1,000 years. They stripped Vane of everything. His name, his titles, his place among the bloodlines, his wealth, his properties. All of it forfeit. All of it returned to the crown he had tried to steal. And they gave him the ending our laws reserve for those who murder their own lords. I will not describe it. It was not pretty. It was not quick. And I did not look away. Because I owed it to 300 years to at least bear witness to how it ended. And because at the very last I saw in his face not defiance, but a kind of exhausted relief. As if the debt he had spent 3 centuries hating was finally, in his ruin, paid in full. I do not forgive him, but I understood him at the end. And understanding is its own cold weight to carry. Silas Marsh was found. The trail led to him exactly as I said it would. He confessed everything within the hour, sobbing, naming Vane, naming the payments, naming the whole architecture of the plot in exchange for a mercy he did not deserve and received only in part. Dr. Nathaniel Graves, the head of my council. The man who told a servant to clean the stain before it's set. His crime was harder to name. He had not poisoned me. But he had signed the reports. He had confirmed the false diagnosis. He had built the medical fiction that let the murder pass as natural death. And whether he did it out of corruption or arrogance, I never fully learned. And it did not matter. He was stripped of his position, cast out of the world of my kind, sent back to the human world he had faked his death to escape. With nothing, the other 11, the ones whose only crime was pride, I let them go. Truly go. Back to their laboratories and their grimoires and their round tables, carrying with them a story they would never dare to tell but would never be able to forget. A story about a dying king and a girl with a bucket, and the difference between looking at your charts and looking at a man. Now let me tell you about the girl, because this was never really my story. I was the throne it happened around. But the story worth telling, the true one, was always hers. The morning after I rose, before the Dark Council, before any of it, I made 2 calls. The first moved her sister, Grace Bell. The girl kept alive in a specialized facility whose monthly cost had eaten Cora's entire life. By dawn, she was being transferred to the finest private medical center in the world. A place in the mountains where the very rich send the people they cannot bear to lose. Every cost covered, every specialist retained, every comfort provided, for as long as she should need it, which, with that care, would be a very long and very good life. The second call erased the debt, all of it. Every collector, every hospital lien, every predatory loan that had circled Cora Bell like the vultures had circled me. Gone, bought, and burned in a single morning. By a fraction of the wealth Sebastian Vane had forfeited when he chose the throne over the floor. There is a kind of justice in that the money a traitor gathered to buy a kingdom instead paid to save the lives of the 2 people his plot had never even noticed. I have thought about that often in the years since, the poison he poured into me, and the good that came out of the estate he lost for pouring it, the debt and the sister. Those were the easy things, those were only money, and I have always had money. The hard thing came in the quiet, in the wreckage of my chamber, after the council had gone, and the body had been taken away, and the great house of Ravensholt had fallen still. I found her there, standing in the middle of the ruined room, looking at the splintered doors, and the fallen instruments and the silver urn still lying on its side where Calloway had dropped it. She looked so small in that vast room, so tired. She had given me her blood and her days and her fear and her sleep, and she had asked for nothing, and she was standing there in the wreckage of a war she had won, looking like a girl who did not quite know what to do now that the fighting was over. I walked toward her, and I, Lord Aldrich Vaymont, 400 years old, feared and respected across a world of shadows, knelt, on one knee amid the wreckage, in front of a servant girl. I took her scarred hand in both of mine, the hand that had held the mop, the hand that had dropped the empty bag, the hand that had opened its own veins to bring a dying king back from the ash. "Thank you, my lord," she whispered, and I shook my head. Because she had it backwards. She always had it backwards. "No," I said, "it is I who thank you. You saw me when no one else did, Cora. 12 of the finest minds in the world stood around my bed, and not one of them looked at me. And you, a girl they told to stay invisible, a girl they told to be nothing. You were the only one who looked." Her breath caught. "You saved the king," I said. "Now the king is asking, not commanding, asking. If you will stay by his side." I paused. Not as a servant, I pressed my lips to her knuckles. The way I had the night she gave me back my life. As my equal, she looked at me for a long moment, this immortal thing kneeling before her. This king, this monster, this creature 400 years old, who had crossed a room in a heartbeat and torn a traitor from the air, and she saw past all of it. Past the power, past the terror, past the fangs and the centuries and the throne. She saw, I think, the thing underneath. The man who had apologized for the mess. The one who had turned his head away from her, offered wrist because he would rather die than drain her. She did not hesitate. "I'll stay," 2 words. And in the ruined chamber of Ravensholt, at the top of the winding stair, in the east wing where no servant had ever been permitted after midnight, a new reign began. And it was not the reign anyone expected. She did not become a queen out of the old stories. She did not sit on a throne in a gown and wave at courtiers. That was never Cora Bell. And I would not have wanted it if it were. She became something the dark world had never seen. She became the one person in my entire court who would tell me the truth. Do you understand what that is worth? To a king who had ruled for 400 years surrounded by people who told him only what he wished to hear? Sebastian Vane had smiled at me for 3 centuries and poisoned me in my sleep. After him, I did not want another smiling face. I did not want another perfect courtier. who agreed with everything I said and measured my throne behind my back. I wanted the girl who had told a doctor to stop, in a room full of monsters, because a man was choking and no one else would say it. So I gave her that place, officially, formally, in front of the whole Dark Council, not a servant, not a decoration, a voice. The one voice at Ravensholt that could say no to me and know that I would listen. She was terrible at it at first. She kept trying to bow. She kept flinching when the old bloodlines looked at her, waiting for one of them to remind her what she used to be. And one by one, I watched her stop flinching because she was right. About all of it. Time and again, in the years that followed, when my court faced some tangled crisis, some ancient riddle, some threat that had my oldest advisors spinning theories of curses and conspiracies, it was Cora who would stand at the back of the room, arms crossed, frowning, and ask the one stupid, simple physical question no one else had thought to ask. What piece is actually broken? She fixed things. That was her gift. It always had been. From the broken machines of her childhood, to the poisoned veins of a dying king, to the 1,000 disasters of running a court in the shadows of the world. She looked at broken things, and instead of despairing at the mystery of them, she rolled up her sleeves and found the piece that was wrong, and Grace grew strong, in the care I had promised. The care did what a lifetime of scraping and borrowing never could. She grew well, she grew whole, and in time, I watched the two sisters walk the halls of my great cold house and fill it, for the first time in centuries, with the sound of ordinary human laughter. I had built Ravensholt to feel like me. Cold! Beautiful, and older than anyone could stand to imagine. And a servant girl with a bucket and a conscience had walked into it, and dropped an empty blood bag on the marble floor, and changed everything it was. I have had a long time to think about all of it, and I have arrived at a truth I did not understand for the first 400 years of my existence. I thought for most of my life that power was strength, age, wealth, the ability to cross a room in a heartbeat and tear a traitor from the air. I had all of those things, and they did not save me. They could not even see the thing that was killing me. Real power is attention. It is the willingness to look at what everyone else has agreed to ignore. It is the humility to believe the answer might be simple. And the courage to say so out loud in a room full of people who have staked their pride on it being complicated. 12 of the finest minds in the world looked at me and saw a curse. A girl with a bucket looked at me and saw the truth. And the difference between them was not intelligence. It was that they were looking at their reflections. And she was looking at me. There is one more thing I have learned, and it is the hardest of the lot, because it is about Vane as much as it is about Cora. I nearly died because I stopped looking at the people closest to me. I decided what Vane was, and I stopped looking. And in the dark where I was not looking, a wound festered into a murder. I decided what Cora was. And a stranger nearly took my throne, while the one person who could save me scrubbed my floors beneath my notice. The same blindness, twice. Once it nearly killed me through a friend I stopped seeing. Once it nearly killed me by hiding the friend who could save me. Look at the people near you, the ones you are certain you already know. That is the whole of the lesson. That is what 400 years and a bag of poisoned blood finally taught me. So here is what I would leave you with. You who have listened to the whole of this long, strange tale. Somewhere near you right now, there is a problem everyone has decided is too complicated to solve. Some broken thing the important men have declared a lost cause, and somewhere near that problem there is a person everyone has decided is not worth listening to. Too young, too poor, too ordinary, told to keep their head down and be nothing. Look at that person, because the wise will look at their charts, and the powerful will look at their thrones. And the loyal, more often than you would ever want to believe, will look at their own advancement right up until the knife goes in. But every so often, in a house full of monsters, there is one person who will look at the truth, plainly, because they cannot stand to leave a broken thing broken, and that person, more than any king, more than any genius, more than any 300-year-old advisor in a perfect black suit, that person is the one who changes everything. I know, because one of them saved my life. Her name was Cora Bell. She was 23 years old. She had a mop and a bucket and a debt and a sick sister, and the memory of the smell of silver from a shop she had been forced to leave, and she was the most powerful person I have ever known. That is the end of it. Not the death of the traitor, not the fall of the court, but a girl in a plain dark dress, standing in a house that used to be cold, listening to her sister laugh in a hallway that used to be silent, and a king who learned, 400 years too late, that the most dangerous thing in the world is not a monster. It is a person who refuses to look away.